Hello and welcome everybody to our first Bishop Vincent Presents for 2026. My name is Rachel Karma and I am the strategy lead of the pastoral plan here at the Diocese of Parramatta. I would like to begin tonight in the spirit of reconciliation and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which the Diocese of Parramatta sits, the land of the Darug and Gundungurra peoples. We pay our respects to the Aboriginal elders, past, present, and future, for they hold the traditions, memories, and wisdom of this country. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. We're delighted to have Archbishop Ryan Jimenez here for tonight's Bishop Vincent Presents. A special thank you to Bishop Vincent, who is with us tonight, and to the very well-connected Brother Mark O'Connor, without whom Archbishop Jimenez may never have had made it to our shores. So thank you, Brother Mark. I think I'm going to get in trouble now for mentioning. Before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So bathrooms are just outside the hall through the second door there, and if we do need to evacuate, we'll head out through those doors into the outdoor area. So here's how this evening will run. Archbishop Jimenez will open with his presentation on an immigrant bishop for an immigrant church. Then His Grace and I will have a short discussion, followed by questions from the floor. And finally, we'll then hear from Bishop Vincent before we close for the night. And lastly, tonight is being filmed and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. Before I bring Archbishop Ryan Jimenez to the stage, I want to pause and acknowledge two significant moments in our life as a diocese. Today, the 21st of April, marks exactly 1 year since the passing of the late Pope Francis. He was himself the son of Italian immigrants, a man who knew in his bones what it meant to be shaped by a migrant story. From the very first trip of his pontificate to the island of Lampedusa, he made clear that the Church's heart must always be turned toward the stranger. In 2017, on World Day of Migrants and Refugees, he gave us a simple yet profound framework of how we can respond. And he said our shared response may be articulated by 4 verbs: to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate. We remember him tonight with gratitude and pray that God grant him eternal rest. The second milestone is that 2026 marks our 40th anniversary as a diocese. So Parramatta is one of the youngest dioceses in Australia and arguably the most multicultural. Our story is a migrant story. After the Second World War, waves of Catholics from Europe settled across Western Sydney, and that movement has never really stopped. From the Philippines, Vietnam, India, the Middle East, the Pacific, and many more, each generation of newcomers have brought in new languages, new traditions, and new ways of expressing prayer. And they haven't just filled our pews, they've shaped who we are. Our diocese exists because of migrants, which is exactly why tonight feels so fitting. Archbishop Jimenez, like our own Bishop Vincent, is himself a migrant, and I suspect what he shares with us this evening will resonate deeply with everyone here. Archbishop Ryan Jimenez is a Filipino-born American archbishop, and in many ways his life is a living example of tonight's theme. Growing up in the Philippines, he worked as a community organizer and teacher before answering the call to the priesthood. He completed his seminary formation in California, earning a master's degree in divinity and theology, and was ordained a priest in 2003. In 2016, Pope Francis appointed him Bishop of Chalang, Kanoa, a diocese in the Western Pacific island of Saipan in Micronesia. In July 2024, Pope Francis appointed him Archbishop of Agaña, making him the 4th Metropolitan Archbishop of Guam. For those unfamiliar with Guam, it is the largest island in Micronesia and an unincorporated territory of the United States, meaning its people are American citizens, though they cannot vote in presidential elections. Guam is home to the Chamorro people, one of the Pacific's oldest indigenous cultures, with a history stretching back over 3,000 years. It also sits alongside one of the most extraordinary natural features on Earth, the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the world's oceans. But Archbishop Jimenez's world extends far beyond Guam. As president of the Episcopal Conference of the Pacific, the largest Episcopal conference in the world by area, he carries the voices of communities spread across a vast stretch of the Pacific, from Guam to Tahiti. And it is in that role that he carried an urgent message to Pope Leo XIV in a private audience last year. Just before that meeting, he received a message from a fellow bishop in Tuvalu, and he said, "Please tell the Holy Father that we are sinking." Climate change, rising sea levels, forced migration, these are not abstract issues for Archbishop Jimenez. They are the daily reality of the people he shepherds. And most recently, Pope Leo XIV has appointed His Grace as a member of the Vatican's Dicastery for Communication, the Holy See's central body and responsible for the Church's global communications and evangelization through media. This is a well-deserved recognition of a shepherd who has proven he knows how to speak and how to listen. Please join me in extending a very warm welcome to His Grace, Archbishop Ryan P. Jimenez.
Thank you, Rachel. That was like a canonization. I've never been introduced that way, and I'm so honored. Good evening. I'm truly honored and grateful for the invitation to be with you today. As Rachel said, I'm grateful to Brother Mark for reaching out, and to Bishop Vincent Long for his gracious welcome, and to the Diocese of, I can't even pronounce, the Filipino in me, Parramatta, is that correct? Yes. Because I thought it's Parramatta, for this opportunity. It is a joy to be here with you. Today I speak not only as bishop, but as someone whose own vocation has been shaped by migration, displacement, and intercultural encounter. This presentation is titled Immigrant Bishop for an Immigrant Church, Perspectives from Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And it comes from a very personal place. My own experience of serving communities where questions of belonging, identity, and culture are not abstractions, but concrete realities. The picture, the map on your right, the Northern Mariana Islands, that's where I started my journey, my first trip outside of the Philippines. If you see in there that small island of Rhoda, that's where I taught for 2 years, in 1995 to 1997. And then when I wanted to go back to the Philippines and enter the seminary, then Bishop Tomas Camacho of this diocese says, "Why don't you stay for a year and see whether you like us or we like you?" And long story short, he accepted me seminary and then sent to California to study theology and ordained for the island, for these islands actually, which is the capitalist island of Saipan. And the other map is Guam. That's where I am now. I was appointed since 2014. So I'm only like a year and a half on Guam, still adjusting. And then look where we are. And as they say, Australia is down under. You are down under. So I left Guam early morning, 6 o'clock, Monday, arrived in Manila, stayed the whole day in Manila, left Manila at 9 o'clock, arrived here this morning at 8 a.m. And no, I'm good. Brother Mark has been taking care of me so far. Thank you, Brother Mark. So that's kind of like, where I am. And where we are in this part of the world. And our Bishops' Conference is all the island nations, from Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, all the way to French Polynesia, Tahiti. There's 17 jurisdictions. So I'll begin with a story of rejection and acceptance. It's not about my story, but with a story from Sierra Leone. In 2012, Pope Benedict XVI appointed Father Henry Aruna as Bishop of the Diocese of Makeni. Almost immediately, protests erupted, not because the newly appointed bishop lacked qualifications or pastoral experience, but because he was not from the local tribe. The newly appointed bishop was an outsider. Despite explanations from church leaders that bishops are not appointed based on tribal boundaries, the people of Makeni refused to accept him. Eventually, he was ordained, not in Makeni, the diocese where he was appointed bishop, but as auxiliary bishop of another diocese, his home diocese. He remained a bishop, but not their bishop. Now, my story, when I was appointed Bishop of Chalancanoa in 2016, that small island, I experienced in a different way something similar. The locals are known as Chamorros. I'm not Chamorro. I was not born in one of the islands. I was a migrant worker from the Philippines, and I worked there before I was ordained a priest. I belong to the diocese by virtue of ordination, yet culturally and ethnically, I felt like an outsider. And this somewhat important experience I had in 2016 as newly ordained bishop, I had to go to Rome they call it, attend the baby bishop school. Bishop Vincent went there. Did you learn anything? That's for another topic. But because I am a Filipino passport holder, I had to fly from Saipan to Guam, a 30-minute flight, and apply for this visa. We had to go to San Francisco, but there was someone in Guam who could authenticate my document and send it by mail. And then, as I finished all the requirements, I went back to the airport early to go back to Guam, to Saipan. Then, when I went through we call it the TSA, where nowadays they check you and all of that, this officer looked at me from head to toe, and then he noticed exactly this pectoral cross. And then he said, "You look familiar." And then I didn't say anything. I said, "Oh, you're the new bishop of Chalancanoa." Then I thought he would butter me up and congratulate me. I said, "Yes, I am." Then he held my passport, "But you have a Philippine passport." Because the locals there are, they have US passports. And then he looked at me again and said, "Why? Are there no Chamorros, locals, who are qualified to be bishops in Chalancanoa?" I couldn't say anything. The question stayed with me. In fact, after that, I went to a different gate and sat there. I usually am not emotional, but for some reason, tears were just flowing. I says, "Lord," I look at this crucifix. Is this a preview of what's going to happen? Can I take it back? So that was kind of at the start of my episcopacy. So that experience stayed with me and continues to stay with me. And from that experience, an uncomfortable question emerged. If I am an outsider, who gets to be inside? And who decides who is inside and who is outside? I recall the word of St. Paul that there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free. There's no male and female, for we're all one in Christ Jesus. In Galatians, we know that by heart. And yet our lived experience tells us something else, that boundaries, ethnic, cultural, historical, still shape the way we relate to one another. So today I invite you to reflect with me on this question. How do we move not just from exclusion and not even just tolerance, but toward true communion? Communion, which is a shared life marked by encounter, dialogue, and mutual transformation, rather than merely coexistence of cultures. We're so familiar with the word multicultural. We're a multicultural church community. Multiculturality shows us to exist side by side. But when we talk about interculturality, it invites us to truly encounter one another, to listen, to share, and to be transformed together. In this presentation, I would have 3 areas: language and identity, worship and parish life, leadership and mission. And this is not only my story, it is the story of many dioceses today. So I would like for us to, as I share, perhaps you can also relate with your own experiences here. And for me, what does this look like in my context? How can we accompany one another across difference as one church? Or in the spirit of synodality, how can we walk together? My previous assignment as bishop, the Diocese of Chalan-Canoa, where I was ordained 2003 and bishop 2016, was established in 1984, so we're of the same age. We just celebrated the 40 years a few years ago. In fact, I invited Cardinal Tagle to come, and he came because he's Filipino. I'm just kidding. Don't call me for that. But I was already assigned in Guam, so I was installed August. It came in November. So I accompanied him to Saipan, and I thought the people on Saipan says, "Oh, we missed you, come back." No, I'm glad to be back. So the diocese includes islands of Saipan, Rhoda, Tinian, that's shown in the map, inhabited in islands with a long history of colonization: Spain, Germany, Japan, and the United States. Its indigenous people, the Chamorros and Carolinians, are joined by migrants from around Asia and Micronesia. What you see in the picture, this is a typical dress of Micronesians. For decades, Filipinos have been the largest ethnic group. And I heard in this diocese, there are many Filipinos who are not behaving. No, there are many Filipinos in this diocese. Filipinos outnumbering Chamorros in some parishes, due in part to migration during the garment industry boom beginning in 1990s. The reality has brought both collaboration and tension. On the one hand, Filipinos serve the community as nurses, teachers, accountants, catechists, parish volunteers. On the other hand, some Chamorros have expressed concern that Filipino migration threatens cultural identity and dilutes claims to self-determination, concerns echoed in similar studies in Guam. Quoting a local scholar, Vince Diaz, on this issue, historian Laurel Ann Monig illustrates the reality that Chamorros, outnumbered by Filipinos, is translated into lost rights and privileges of the Chamorros. And this is direct quotation. For every Filipino who arrives in Guam, said one politician in the early 1970s, a Chamorro loses a chair in a classroom, a house in a subdivision, a job in the market, a bed in the hospital. What was overlooked, of course, was that Filipino and other non-Chamorro labor built the classroom, the house in the subdivision, built a market, the hospital, and so on and so forth. These are just some of the painful stories and realities, stories of family breakdown, for example, linked to migration patterns, reminding us that demographic shifts affect not only in numbers, but relationships and wounds. So before asking theologically how the church can be intercultural, we must acknowledge that history, trauma, and power shape how communities encounter each other. And so let me begin with the first area, as I mentioned earlier, language and identity. Language is not simply communication. It is memory, dignity, and belonging. For the Chamorro people, language carries the story of survival through colonization. During the era of U.S. Navy rule, speaking Chamorro, which is also, the people are called Chamorro, the language is also Chamorro, So speaking their own language was discouraged, and English promoted as the language of progress. This produced a generational decline in fluency and a sense of inferiority. In fact, in the history books, an executive order stated this: "The present force of native teachers will cheerfully and harmoniously cooperate with the teachers of English, that the greatest benefits may be derived by both scholars and preceptors, designating English as the only official language, and ordered that Chamorro language must not be spoken except for official interpreting." Right? We'll see your reaction. Today, efforts to revitalize the language, schools, devotional practices in the parishes, liturgy, community life, these are not merely cultural preservation. They are acts of healing. And I don't want to go into debate, to a certain extent, decolonization, a big word, but let's not get into that. To pray in Chamorro language is not only to pray. It is to reclaim a story that was once silenced. As a bishop, honoring the indigenous language is not optional. It is part of affirming the dignity and agency of the people entrusted to my pastoral care. But here lies the pastoral question: how do we affirm the indigenous language while also honoring migrants' need to worship in their own tongues? Right? I experienced this as a priest in the Mariana Islands. Yes, it's important. I would encourage preserving the local language. But also the migrant workers says, we also have this need to express who we are. So how do you find that delicate balance as a pastoral leader? Which would lead me to the second part of this talk: worship and parish life. Two parishes in the diocese, Cristoray and Mount Carmel Cathedral, my two parishes I was assigned before I became bishop, hold multiple masses in different languages: Chamorro, English, Filipino, and sometimes Chuukese. The structure allows a group to worship in a language that speaks to the soul, but it also creates a kind of parallel existence. Different communities under one roof, rarely interacting. 6 a.m., the locals, Chamorro. 9 a.m., English, kind of mixed, and where the young people also come. 11 a.m. in Filipino. Those are my kababayans, those who work in the hotels and everyone else. And, singing is always, with the Cordero ng Dios, all of that. And then in the afternoon, if there's, a Chuukese community. So, yeah, we're all in one church, but having different times of worship in different languages. Brett Hoover mentioned this concept of a shared parish. It's a term he used both as a space of separation and encounter. Cultural groups maintain distinct ministries, yet they must negotiate shared space, even sometimes in parking lots, especially during major seasons like the Triduum or Paris feasts. These negotiations can be uncomfortable. Which language do we use when there is only one Mass, like the Sacred Triduum? The questions I always get in preparing for big liturgical celebration or fiestas: will the readings be in English? Or maybe one English, second reading in Filipino, and then maybe the Gospel in Chamorro. And then another group, how about the Rifalawash, another language, the Carolinian? So who feels included? Who feels left out? This is where the practical challenge of including everyone comes in. Yes, it's always uncomfortable, but that discomfort is not failure. It's an invitation for communion. And we Catholics, we love this word. It's an invitation for integration. Rather than merely unity in difference, the author Susan Bigelow Reynolds invites us to pursue solidarity in difference, a posture in which each group recognizes responsibility for the flourishing of the other, and not just protection of its identity. When ministers meet to plan for liturgical celebrations, for example, it is critical that no single person will speak on behalf of the group that he or she represents without thorough consultation and proper discernment. Pastoral leaders must avoid speaking for communities. For example, our choir leader would say, this Chamorro leader of the parish council would say, oh, the Filipinos would want this. I mean, how do you know? Why do you let them speak whether they really want this? Or the chair of the fiesta committee would say, but the Chamorros would prefer this. So we must avoid misrepresenting different cultural groups. Courtney Goto calls this technical term epistemic ventriloquism. We can have that for a spelling bee. Yeah, I had her in one of my classes at Fordham University. She's Japanese, and she describes epistemic ventriloquism as speaking for others without really listening to them. In her essay, Ventriloquism and Epistemic Violence, Courtney Goto warns of the dangers of representing the insider's experiences. She views that outsiders who give voice to people create epistemic violence to the latter. Pastoral leaders should therefore be conscientious about proposing practices that do not matter to people. Otherwise, as Goto suggests, practitioners contribute to the immigrant's experience of marginalization. Our role as ministers is not so much to speak for communities, but to create spaces where they can speak for themselves. The choice of language in worship can also be analyzed in terms of cultural lenses. Monocultural, like only Chamorro. Multicultural, Chamorro, English, Filipino. Or intercultural, there's interaction. Ricky Manalo explains that monocultural lens assumes one cultural norm. A multicultural lens allows parallel coexistence. An intercultural lens promotes shared engagement and mutual transformation. Our parishes move among all the three, depending on the celebration. The parishes of Cristo Rey and Our Lady of Mount Carmel Cathedral go back and forth in using three lenses for liturgical celebrations, depending on particular celebrations and degrees of importance in parish events. The annual fiesta, for example, is fiesta big here? For us Filipinos, Chamorros, there's always fiesta. Do you have roasted pig like we do? Is it good? Is the skin crunchy? All right, very good. So in fiesta, for example, it aims at operating an intercultural lens where parishioners of all backgrounds come together. An intercultural liturgy would be at the same time multilingual as well as multicultural. With this difference, the various cultural groups of the parish would work at preparing and celebrating the various parts of the rite with each other. They come together. Don't just assign, you do that. Make them be involved in the planning. Although success is not a guarantee, it is vital to recognize the in-between spaces of these three lenses in liturgical worship. Successes and failures at liturgies, insights gained, taking into account that our liturgical planning is still an unfinished task. It is an ongoing process towards interculturality. Intercultural worship is not simply multilingual. It should be participatory, co-created, even when messy. Right? Liturgical planning can be messy. Do you agree? All right. There's even liturgical police. My first pastor, as I was a priest 2003, I was his parochial vicar. He's a Jesuit. So anything goes. He didn't care. So I was in charge. Why it can be messy? In my previous assignment in Chalan Canoa, seating arrangement for the different choir groups can be a problem. The Chamorros, the locals, the innocents should be in the front. Filipinos are at the back pew. Sometimes even where people sit, front or back, this reflects deeper cultural divides. But there's also joy and success. For example, when I was installed in August of 2024 in Agaña, we had the combined choir, and all ethnic groups sang in Chamorro. So all those members from different ethnic groups, everybody learned the song in Chamorro. They probably had weeks of practices, all for Ryan, all for the people of God. Everybody sang Cordero ng Diyos na nag-aalis. It's like, our national anthem. And then, a mixed language of Ang Katawan ni Cristo, Behold the Body of Christ. Does anyone know that song? Right, behold the body of Christ. Then there's that Tagalog part in here. So there is also joy when everybody is able to really plan together. Voices are heard. They're not just being assigned. And then the outcome can be beautiful. And this leads me to the third part, leadership and mission. Liturgy is not only the place where interculturality must take shape. It must also be reflected in leadership and decision-making. If the church is truly intercultural, representation cannot remain symbolic. I mentioned the book Shared Parish by Brett Hoover. And in this book, he mentioned the image of the Chapel of the Martyrs of the Diocese of Sacramento, California, to represent the Catholic life in Sacramento across boundaries of time, space, and culture. The Chapel of Martyrs contains a mural depicting the resurrected Christ above a large freestanding crucifix affixed to the ground before the mural. Around Christ stand a selection of martyrs from early church, men on the right, women on the left. But underneath the arches painted below them stand the martyrs of later centuries. And in here below were the saints of Saint Andres Dung Lac of Vietnam. Bishop Vincent would know him, right? Saint Maximilian Kolbe of Poland, and the new saints. There was no Pedro Calungsod yet. I wanted to put a picture there, but I forgot I'm in Australia. I have problem with copyright and all of that. So, the shared parish, where two or more cultural groups with distinct masses and ministries, but who share the same facilities, and with this structure, immigrants and facilities can worship together, and the ministry of groups already in residence can continue their worship without disruption. Okay? In terms of leadership in the parish pastoral councils are one place where leadership structures reveal whose voices matter. I know canon law says it's optional to have parish council. What is a must is a finance, right? Although during the synod, I was there of the Synod of Bishops in 2024. There's an ongoing discussion that eventually canon law, maybe Professor Miriam discussed it with you, would parish council would become it would be required, right? So in all of this, in a parish setting, it's important like the composition of the decision-making body, right? Chamorro, Filipino, Chukis, Palawans, are they all represented? Hospitality alone is insufficient. Yeah, the question is, are we a welcoming parish? Hospitality says, why did I have that? Hospitality says you are welcome here. Interculturality says your leadership, your voice matters. So this, as I mentioned about parish council, the two parishes, these are the big parishes in my previous assignment, Diocese and Canoa. Look at Mount Carmel, 19 members, Chamorro 16, Carolinian 0, Filipinos 3. And in this parish, majority of the parishioners are Filipinos. Cristoray 13, the same. Cristoray is where the business area, our mini CBD. 10, Chamorro 0, Calinian 1 Filipino member, 1 Palawan, and 1 Chukis. Even though statistical data presented earlier show that Filipinos, primarily immigrants, are the largest ethnic group in the CNMI, parish consultative and decision-making bodies represent the dominant culture. So if Filipinos are the largest group, why are they not at the table where decisions are made? And that's kind of the questions for most immigrants, right? If you say we're welcome, and we want to be intercultural, why are we not at the table? Yes, there is a sense of welcoming of all peoples in the parishes, but who is really missing at the table where decision-making processes occur? And sometimes too, it really is the choice of the immigrants themselves. For example, where I'm now in Guam, we have this hardworking Filipina volunteer. She works at the courthouse is right across the Cathedral Basilica. And her name is Cindy. Now, Cindy has a special arrangement with her boss. Whenever there's funeral, she would leave her work and come help prepare. She's like the sacristan. You don't mess with her. She knows everything. And then she would go back to work and stay late at night to kind of make up for the hours. And we have noontime mass, 12:10, so that those at work can attend mass. She would be there, and all of the celebrations. So we had, as I was new, like Cindy, we have this conversation in the spirit. Familiar term? Yeah. Join us, Cindy. I would really love you to be part of this conversation. Right? Like typical Filipino. She said yes. Did she show up? No, that's typical Filipino. Or that's maybe even biblical. And then I asked her, why the following day? I didn't want to be harsh on her. And she just responded, because I'm comfortable where I am. Yeah. And those words really stayed with me because, okay, my role as a leader is also to accompany her, but not to force on her. Yes, she's comfortable where she is, because here I am. I really wanted her to you've been there, you know everything, you're very involved, be with us. You're sharing. The conversation is very important also for others. But she's not there yet. I just have to be patient with her, and many others, right? So, when parishes rally around mission, collaboration naturally increases. A vivid example is the St. Vincent de Paul Society, where locals and immigrants work side by side to serve the poor and displaced. I don't know if you heard the news, but just before I left Guam, a week before, we had the super typhoon in the Marianas. At first, the forecast was it would hit Guam directly, and then it headed north. And then the eye of the storm hit Saipan, my previous, where I was ordained bishop. I stayed there more than half of my life. To this day, they don't have power and water. Many houses have been destroyed. And in the span of 11 years, we were hit by 3 super typhoons. In one smaller island, Tinian, the church was totally damaged by the storm previous year, 7 years ago. Then they built a temporary structure. That temporary structure is gone. Last Sunday, they had mass outside of the church. At the same time, people still don't have power and water. Of course, there's a lot of help coming in and all of it, but it's things like this when we let go of Chamorro Filipino, there's a need. We're all together in this mission. There is help. Here's what is needed. When parishes rally around mission, collaboration naturally increases. And I think that's also true for our parishes, right? Discipleship, Jesus Christ binds us all. Accompaniment, walking together, synodality, and a shared mission to those on the margins. Yes, as William Wills notes, we are not here to build buildings. We are here to build community. I think I jumped into my last slide, but when you say not to build buildings, but to build community, when I was a younger bishop, well, I still am young, but no hair. I'll be 10 years as bishop in August. I think my first year, second year, and I had a brother priest, so every year he wanted to repaint his church, literally the building. And, in the islands, to repaint is expensive. And we're not a rich parish. And then one day, he came and he cried. He said, well, why are you crying, brother? And then he said, because every time he would go to his parish, he couldn't help but look at the church of Iglesia ni Cristo. It's big in the Philippines. I think they're here also. And they're like the same color. It's really nice and newly painted. And here we are, the Catholic Church. It's not well painted. And they just like painted last year, like he wanted maybe this time green. But anyway, I'm being sarcastic. But it's difficult because I wanted to just emphasize, we're building, as long as, it's not like Tinian, the structure was ruined, we have a place, to worship. What's more important is building our people. A truly intercultural church requires pastoral leaders who walk with the people. Yes, for the sacraments, but also as companions in life. Jesus showed us examples in the Gospels on how he walked with the people. He built relationships. How about us? Are we present to real people in their struggles? Are we attentive to those whose voices go unheard? Do we foster communion when it is difficult, not only when convenient? This is the heart of accompaniment, walking together, not just mere business meetings, but mutual belonging. So let me close where I began, with the bishop in Sierra Leone who remained an outsider because of the people could not receive him. Being new in Guam, my current assignments for more than a year now, there is still a part in me that remains an outsider. I think that would forever be my script. However, each day I wake up grateful for the gift of vocation to serve. And as one priest told me, ministry is heart work with a T, not hard with a D. Yes, it is also hard work, but it's more about the heart. In Chamorro, corazon, like Spanish word, corazon. And the hard work of this work is not to fear difference, but to receive it as a gift. So diversity is not a problem to fix. It is a gift to receive. May God give us the courage to live, not only as a multicultural church, but as an intercultural one, rooted in communion, justice, and shared mission. As we say in Chamorro language, si Diyos maasi. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Your Grace, Archbishop Jimenez. I found that very inspiring and uplifting, and I believe you probably all did as well. And your stories actually resonated deeply for many of us, saw our own parish life in yours. The challenges you named around interculturality and climate change are ones we carry together here in Parramatta Diocese, and you've also given us fresh eyes to face them. So you've given us a lot to think about, and I'm just going to ask everyone for 5 minutes just to chat to the person next to you while we get our next part ready, and there'll be a Q&A after our conversation. So again, Archbishop, thank you so much. Ministry is heart work, not hard work. I think I'm going to take that one. You've been part of really diverse communities, as you were sharing. What's been the most meaningful thing you've learned from that experience and from being with all these diverse communities?
Yeah, it really is important for me to remind myself that our unity is also, the common ground is Jesus Christ, right? We may have different expressions, different ways of doing things, different practices, but in the end, as St. Paul would say, we're all united in faith. Because if we have that common grounding, then, we would be able to really see each other as brother and sister. As I made that quotation from St. Paul, like neither Jew nor Greek, and all of that. And sometimes things, it's easier said than done. And so with that in mind, and even just coming into a parish life, for example, because I'm not from Guam or the Marianas, and as a church leader, to really interact with people, be with people, right? I don't know with Bishop Vincent, but I'm not that type of bishop who would be in my office from 8 to 5. I get bored. And even when I need to because of work, I would stand up and say hello to each department's person, talk about their love life, how was mom and dad. And it's really important to connect. And for me, I found that helpful. And when you talk about, integration, I just think about now because, again, we're so big on coming together, be an integrated parish. So my first confirmation in one parish we're in, it's the Chukis. They're mostly from the island of Chuk in the Federated States of Micronesia. And they wanted to have a separate confirmation time because of the language and all of that. So I said, okay, I'll do it this year, but next year you should join the parish community. And here I was speaking as the ideal integration of parish. But after the confirmation, and I got time to interact with them, to listen to them and talk to the parents, and with the priest guiding them, I realized the reason why they're not ready yet to integrate. Many of them, they don't have cars. They're dependent, like a family of 10 would have one car, and they would do scheduling in such a way that, and there's no public transportation in Guam. There's taxi, but very expensive, right? And the other thing is that, they're not quite comfortable yet expressing themselves in the English language, the Chukis language, which they are comfortable, so that their catechism is Chukis and all of that. So I said to myself, and many other considerations, sometimes as a church leader, we want things to happen right away, like magic, integration, one together, kumbaya, all of us. But no, I gotta respect the pace of each one, where people are at. And I think that's what heart work is, that I gotta be more sensitive, be open to where they are, rather than imposing on my ideal, I'm the knowledgeable one. It's has to be integrated. Sorry, I could talk.
No, it's great. I think we'd love to listen to all day for that. Your story, you're from the Philippines, and we have a lot of Filipinos here, and especially in our diocese. And as you were mentioning, it's one of movement and belonging. So what does home mean to you now? And how has your Filipino heritage continued to shape who you are as a shepherd?
I could name songs that talk about home and heart and all of that. But just based on my experience, I never really thought that I would be uprooted from Chalancanoa Diocese and be moved to Guam. Even when I was a parochial vicar for 3 years, then my bishop moved me to the cathedral as rector. For 1 week, I couldn't even pack my things. So, our life as priests, I thought I would be here, but, we are always on the move. So home for me is where God would put me. It's quite romantic or ideal, but I learned it the hard way, in the sense that with my experience of moving, not by choice, well, in the end, obedience, Lord, but it's difficult because we're human beings, right? We make friends become families, you're attached to people. And now I know why bishops have to, or it's in canon law that priests are rotated, they're given new assignments, right? We have that here also. Mga kababayan, do you follow your favorite priest or you stay in your parish? All right, good. So that may change, but right now I said, Lord, with that Ignatian spirituality of indifference, wherever God takes me, Lord, home is where you put me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. As I mentioned before, it's 1 year today since Pope Francis passed away. And you also mentioned you're going to celebrate your 10-year anniversary as being Bishop and Archbishop. What do you consider, what are the things that you're carrying into your ministry? What are the legacies that he's taught you? What are the things that you're carrying for you in your ministry?
When he died last year, right? Last year, yeah, it says 1 year, yeah. I was devastated. Well, not only because he appointed me bishop, that was unexpected, but because he really, as a priest, kind of inspired me to go out there. Don't wait for someone to come and ring at your doorbells. Go knocking on doors out there. The phrases like smell the sheep, and his words is Spanish, right? Like todo, everyone is included, right? And then more so when I was appointed bishop through a limina visit, and even though English was not his first language, you feel the warmth, you feel the genuine care, and a true father and pastor. And for me, one of the things that perhaps helped me shape my own heart is the way his pastoral approach. Whoever you are, you're a child of God, right? Because in this modern age, there's all this, issues, right? But I think the basic teaching of we're created in God's image and likeness, he, as the younger people would say, he made it real for me. And that simple pastoral touch and approach. And I just shared that, even when staying at Santa Marta and having access to the workers, and just really his style of leadership, which is not up there, but someone who is with the people. So I think, there is still a lot for us, not just me, to really learn from his examples. Yeah. So I'm grateful, forever grateful to him. At times I blame him. Why do you move me to Guam? I wanted to stay.
Thank you. Now, I don't know if many people know, but you're a keen runner and you love playing tennis as well. And actually, Catholic Youth Parramatta just had their yearly lifted sports event. And it was a really great success on Sunday because they were able to come together, bit of rivalry, but they also came together to celebrate God and in the gift of faith and in sport and everything like that. How important is physical health to you, and how do you see it connecting to our life and faith?
Yes. Well, a few years after my ordination as a priest, so probably around 2006, I was diagnosed with diabetes type 2. So I had to do something. Lord, I don't want to die early. And my mom is diabetic. There's 4 of us siblings, so I was the lucky one who got that from the genes and the lifestyle. Like, Filipinos, they feed you everywhere. And it always comes with rice. So I thought it really is important to put sports in your life. And then in my previous diocese, we actually had the health ministry. So we encouraged the young. We had annual walkathon and all of that. So I wanted to make a good example. So I joined, at one point, before I became bishop, I joined triathlon. I'm humble, but I'm proud of it. And then I had my first marathon in Honolulu. It's more about for myself because the training actually is more difficult than the actual event. Because the actual is just like celebration of what you prepared for. So I've done a couple of marathons. Because at stake really is like shame if I sign up and I don't go. So the New York Marathon, I did Chicago, Berlin. I even did the one on winery but guess what? I got accepted to run for the Sydney Marathon in August. And I need a team from this diocese of Parramatta to give me water. When I go back, I'll start training. As you can see right now, I don't look like, a marathon runner because my body fat is in the double digits. Yeah. But I'll start training because it really, it's not a competition. You really compete against yourself. And in the actual, even in the training, it's also a wonderful time to pray And especially like your place, where I come from, the island, we go early, the beautiful scenery, right? I mean, the salt water that you smell along the way, then you see creatures in there. It's just wonderful. But, my first love really is tennis. So when I put my luggage in Bishop Vincent's car, I saw some tennis rackets. Yeah, but I didn't tell him. I'll tell him publicly. His rackets are old. Give him a new one. He said he just played yesterday. And it's good for... So there is a parallel between physical health and spiritual health. The discipline you have in physical health, how we wish we could also apply that to spiritual health. Our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. But, as one Pacific Islander told me, yeah, it's the temple. That's why I'm building like 3rd floor, 4th floor, 6th floor. Yeah. But you know what I mean. Sorry.
I love that was a Pacific Islander that said that to you. Just changing gears a little bit, as you mentioned, what's happened just a week ago at home, which is really sad, but I guess with how the world is and the climate crisis, Australia has a unique responsibility to the Pacific, geographically, politically, and as neighbours in faith. And your conversation with Pope Leo about climate change and migration, what did you find yourself hoping Australia would hear?
Yeah, that's an important question, but difficult. And I do want to go into the politics of it. But, from a church perspective, I was blessed to be part of the group of the COP in Belém, Brazil. And the bishops' conferences signed a document, which unfortunately, our signatures here in the Pacific were not part of that. Europe and FCB, Federation of Bishops' Conferences in Oceania. And true, Australia really plays a significant role. And I was even hoping that the next COP would be in Australia. I think, when I was there in Belém, there was a lot of, because, right, with great power, what movie was that, comes great responsibility. I think you're at a position to be able to make change and help our neighboring island nations. I did mention to the Holy Father about Tuvalu, and that priest, is the prefect there, he really called me and said, tell him we're sinking. And that's true, and many of the people in Tuvalu in Australia are here. And it's a mixed feeling. While the younger ones welcome the opportunity, education, but the parents to leave home, your question about home, where they grew up, it's not just sad, it's really, there are no choice. So I hope as a church we can find more concrete ways of responding. And we will have our leadership meeting of the Federation of Catholic Bishops' Conferences in Guam next month. So I'm hoping that this would be an important part of our discussion. Like, Pope Francis, Laudato Si, and then I'm also involved with the Laudato Si movement. But it really is very challenging because also where I am, Guam, which is a U.S. territory, and U.S. was not represented in that conversation. And I can speak for this because, now that I'm a U.S. citizen, before I was just careful. It's not all that. Sometimes, we have the arrogance and say, hey, we can do this, we're powerful. But, I wish we could do more in terms of, for the greater good. So Australia, like the U.S., I think you're in a better position to do more. What would that be? I don't know. Maybe ask Bishop Vincent. He would know better than I do. Thank you. I hope that answers this because it's difficult.
No, that's really good. And I think it's good that we get to think more about that as responsibility.
And if I may just add, you remember I talked about the typhoon? In 11 years, 3 super typhoon. And this one is the worst because it lingered. stayed for 3 days. That's why the damage is really, really, really bad. And these are all effects of global warming, climate change. Yeah, and we're saying knock on wood, but more to come. We gotta be prepared.
Speaking about Pope Leo, he newly appointed you a member of the Dicastery for Communications. And so how do you see the Church's role in shaping the moral and ethical framework around, I don't know, AI? And what unique contribution can the Vatican bring to a conversation that is largely being driven by technologists and governments?
Yeah, I just had my first communication via email with this new appointment, but it's all in Italian. It says, "Oh my goodness, Lord, how can I be part of this team?" Then the assistant to the nuncio says, "Well, it's about time for you to learn Italian." He says, "I'm old. I'm 54 years old. Don't have the time to learn a language." But when I was in Rome to receive my pallium in June of 2025, I went to this dicastery. And one of the reporters, or I think she's the assistant head, mentioned that they have a staff who would devote time simply on looking at YouTube, all those channels, and verifying whether it's fake news or not. Because, you could always put there like Vatican News or something about, the St. Peter's Square and then a bishop, but then it's not authentic. It's fake news. So a lot of that. So how do we determine, real from not real? And we could be easily, even our parishioners, they would forward messages like, "What does this mean?" It says, "Look, it's not, look at your source," and all of that. So part of it really is, finding ways on which platforms really would really be more faithful to our, or we can effectively share, but still, faithful to our teaching. So I don't know yet. We haven't had really a formal. I could imagine there would be a lot of work along those lines, and Pope Leo is coming up with an encyclical on AI. And there was already a document recently published by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith and the Education of Culture and Sports, and always emphasis on the person, that we're not slaves of technology, right? But look at me, if I leave the house and I left my phone, I go back and leave the house. I grew up with my grandmother teaching me, don't leave without your rosary. So I have with me my rosary. A few times I left my rosary, says, never mind, the Blessed Mother will understand. But then if I forget my phone, I have to go back and get my phone. So I too, I'm a victim of this secularization, that we are enslaved by gadgets, by technology. So I'm hoping that, my contribution on behalf of Oceania, I didn't even know why I'm appointed, to be honest. I asked the nuncio, why? She says, nope, that's Rome. They don't tell you why. She says, okay. So perhaps, bringing in a voice from the Pacific Islands, where internet connection is a problem. It's a luxury for you, right? I enjoy the high-speed Wi-Fi of Bishop Vincent and his residence. But when we do have the Episcopal Conference, when we have Zoom, right? One would all of a sudden be gone, and then another one would be gone, because connectivity is a problem, right? So it's not a luxury for other neighboring islands. And AI, our Catholic Schools Week, that was our theme. What do we do with AI? It's here already, right? So I think we need to, I feel like sometimes we as a church, we're like years behind. Right? Society is already there, but what do we do now? And when I speak a lot, that means I couldn't answer your question. What do you do with AI? Thank you.
No, I think you've done very well, and we're up to our nearly our final part, but this is the voices on the floor. So how are we going to do this? It's called question and answer, not statement and statement. So please make sure that you say your name clearly, and you don't have to do any statements. We just love for you to just give a beautiful short question. So hands up Like this, Anita will come to you, say your name and your question. Thank you so much.
Hi, Father Helen. What's the percentage of Catholics in Guam?
I think the latest US census is every 10 years, so 2020. If I'm not mistaken, it's still in the 80%. But even though it's high, as we know, the reality is those practicing are way below that. Yeah. But it's still predominantly Catholic.
Hello, my name is Nguyen, and I'm asking this question for a friend. She asks, you can probably guess who the friend is. How can Australia better advocate for climate migration with dignity? So I guess that's going from what you just said. What do the people in your region and your place need us to be advocating for them?
Yeah. Thank you.
I can only speak from a limited experience with people from that region, because in our region, there are 3 island nations that are considered vulnerable. Tuvalu is one, Kiribati, and Marshall Islands. Marshall Islands is more on the northern side where I am, so there's probably less Marshallese coming here. But Tuvaluans, and I believe also from Kiribati, would be here. That's an important question, just like perhaps not just because of climate change, but any migrant story, that movement from not just welcoming and the in-between, but really that interculturality wherein you would give a voice to the people. But it takes time. It's a long process before we can even talk about let them integrate. It's so ideal for us to talk about integration right away, right? But our people also, we need to be mindful that they go through different stages and it's different for each one. So I believe for the host, like Australia, to be more sensitive to who they are and where they are. In my homily last Sunday, the road to Emmaus, I used that image of Jesus being the guest, like when he was invited, come, stay with us. And then when he took the bread, from the guest to becoming the host, right? Because he broke the bread and shared it. And kind of like dynamics wherein, we share roles. It's not like, okay, once you, and then you're going to really there is that interaction. And Paris communities can be wonderful places of being a good starting point, right? Because in wherever we go, we bring with us our faith, right? A Filipino theologian, his name is Gemma Tulud Cruz. I think she gave a lecture here in Melbourne, and she mentioned we kababayan, so when we travel, we don't travel light. As Brother Marcos, I have one check-in luggage, one small luggage, and a backpack, and we bring with us everything, right? Our food, our recipe, maybe even our music and all of that. And then she said, intertwined in all of this, the luggage that we bring, we bring with us our faith. So an immigrant story, and especially the ones in Tuvalu, the Catholics, at least I can speak for them based on my interaction, would be how can they continue to nurture that faith? That's why that story about language, it's important that they can be accompanied also and be in a space where they're comfortable being who they are. Yeah. Sorry, but that's a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
The question, my name is Leonard Pinto. The question is about unity and diversity. I think you have faced that problem, and that is everywhere. But the interesting thing is, the College of Cardinals it's multicultural, but there is unity. And that's there among the clergy. But when it comes to lay people, we have a problem sometimes. And culture. The issue that I'm trying to say, push is, instead of unity in diversity, can we think about unity that transcends diversity? So we are thinking about values, and I would call that uniculturalism, where people have diverse cultural backgrounds, but in values they are the same. And I think that's the way that Australians are also thinking nowadays. Multiculturalism separates and creates so many problems. There is no unity in a sense. And monoculturalism is bad because it integrates, it kills your culture. So what do you think about going in that direction? Unity that transcends diversity.
So unity that transcends diversity. Yeah, I think it's the same line with what I've shared and we wanted to accomplish, right? And again, from a faith perspective, if that unity is because it's Jesus Christ that brings us together, what a way to have that starting point, right? From a faith component. Yeah.
And you also mentioned that tension as well.
Correct.
Yeah. That with unity there is tension, but that doesn't necessarily is a bad thing as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Hello, Adrian Gomez. My mum is from Cebu, and we have very good lecture on there. My question, you mentioned decolonising just in passing.
I tried to avoid the word, and you caught it.
I was just thinking, because many migrants they bring with them their colonial mentality, and I was just wondering if you might just say a few words about your interest in decolonising and what that might involve in the church.
Yeah, I think my example about the language, wherein they were not even allowed to use their native language in schools, in offices, because it's not a superior, it was an inferior language, right? So I think there's part of that wherein, it's important to really emphasize the value, the dignity of the people from that place, right? I'm not an expert in decolonization. I know there's a lot of academic work in it, and I know that even if you put that concept into a church perspective, it can be somewhat controversial. For example, your mom is from Cebu, where for us in Guam, we have Pedro Calungsod from Cebu, became a saint. I was a catechist who helped Blessed Diego, the Jesuit priest. And the faith that was brought to us during the Spanish era, I mean, I'm grateful, right? So we cannot just erase that. But I think the issue of decolonization is much larger than just that. So I'm not an expert of that. And maybe Brother Mark can invite someone who's an expert in decolonization. Or invite me, we'll have Lechon and talk about that. Thank you.
Yes. Got another question here. Thank you.
Hi, Your Grace. My name is Alvin. My question, it's been almost 10 years, I assume, since that fateful conversation at the airport with the TSA officer. Since then, has your perspective on those words changed?
Yes and no. Yes, because it actually helped me to be more understanding with where people are at. Because related to that, a very good friend even would says, why are these migrant workers behaving the way they are? They're only guests here. Like if you have a guest at home, they should just behave like guests, right? And that didn't sit well with me, but that's his perspective, and he's still a friend, right? And I think that kind of, I've shared that story many times because it really stays here, right? In Philippine telenovela, it's like, ang sakit, right? It's really painful. But then talk about going beyond, how we can really rise above that. And in fact, sometimes when I would be at the airport, it says, I wonder where this person is. Now that I'm in Guam, because this was at Guam airport, I wonder if, he would be there lining up communion, Maybe at that time, you're thinking of me denying him, now I'll be in trouble. So what it helped me is not easy, but not just tolerating, but really kind of like having that sense of understanding and patience where people are at. And what do I do as a church leader now in this position to help him see beyond that? Yeah, and not preaching, but perhaps on becoming a friend or knowing where he's coming from and all of that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We have another one here.
Hi, I'm Lillian. You spoke about two parishes that you work closely with. I just wanted to find out, you've got a large area that you work with, a lot of islands, a lot of communities. Have you been able to replicate that across the whole diverse community that you've got, or is it something that's very hard to do?
It's work in progress. So what we do now, because usually also membership is, by word of mouth, by, like the sheriff in town, okay, he's like the big donor in the parish. Like, okay, I'll recommend, but really like, okay, and then father would be very shy because, oh my gosh, we might lose a benefactor, So from recognizing those people whom we need in the church to help with this and that, to really having a composition of a particular group like parish council or finance council, not based on these things, but really representation, right? And it's still a work in progress. I would say for the most part, it still is happening, but there are parishes, like for example in Guam now, one parish in particular, Santa Teresita. Every parish I go, I say it's my favorite parish. But truly, Santa Teresita is my favorite parish because that's a dynamic parish, and active youth involvement, and it's so diverse, and everybody just like have the kind of like the ideal and the membership of the different ministries. Like it doesn't matter whether you're Filipino or not. Like going beyond, as you said, from all of this diversity. Yeah, it's still there, but there's progress, slowly but surely.
We have time for one more question. Yep.
Your Grace, I'm Carmen, and I just want to ask about marriages, about interracial marriages. Are they common, and how does the community accept interracial marriages?
Muchas gracias, Carmen. We had an earlier conversation from Uruguay, so hablo español un poquito. This is difficult because, right, perspectives from Northern Marianas. Northern Marianas only became part of U.S. immigration in 2008, I believe. So there are marriages, well, when you get married, then eventually, in the process, you become a citizen. But there are those wherein the process takes time and that there's separation of families. So that's not a good example. There are those who are accepted. There are those also who are not accepted. So it's mixed, right? So it's mostly locals, Chamorros, marrying Filipinas. Here's the sad story. Before we became part of U.S. immigration, many kababayans, we call it kababayan, from the Philippines, work as bartenders. There's even like a club. And so really kind of like the locals would look down on these women. And many of them, this men who would go to the clubs, left their wives and married these Filipinas. To the point wherein, Sister Stella Mangona, who was like helping us in the diocese as our counselor therapist, when she would come and share with me a story related to this about marriage, and that one left his local wife and married a Filipina. When she introduced something, I said, "Sister, please don't tell me she's Filipina again." I can say that because I'm Filipino. And then she said, "Sad to say." So there is that part. So migrants are perceived as you're affecting our families. You're what was the term? Like the breakup of family. But there are also those who are really well accepted, right? So it's mixed. So I don't know whether it's maybe a combination also of history, what happened, and maybe the grace of God, that sacrament of marriage indeed works. Not maybe, it is the grace of God. Thank you.
I think I just want to, change the tone of tonight, but who has inspired you most in your faith journey?
My grandmother, the one who told me about the rosary. It was so raw. Yeah, so I come from a small island in the Philippines called Siquijor. They don't know where that is. It's an island where, in Tagalog, we have kulam. Yeah, that if you hate someone and you want that person to die, you come and then, they would do some kind of magic and then that person will get sick. We're known for that. They practice and all of that. But my grandma, my mom, my parents were not, because, my mom was a public school teacher, my dad was, they were busy working so that, we could survive. So grandma was my first catechist. And I went to the public school. Mababang paaralan. Yeah. And so grandma would be the one to from the house accompany me. And then and also with sacramental preparation, it's not like here, it's throughout the school year. It's every month of May. Flores de Mayo. We offer flowers to the Blessed Mother Ducat. It was also grandma. Yeah. So, stages of faith formation. I'm so grateful I started with her. She inspired me with that. And then my older brother, he was the one who really wanted to be a priest. But he saw the light and got married. and I didn't want, but I went to what we call minor seminary, high school seminary. And then mother wouldn't allow me to study somewhere else except be with my brother in the minor seminary. So my brother, to this day, is more priestly than I am. When I go home, he would be the one to advise me, and even though I would show my ring. He's a more priestly one. So in the family, my brother, to this day, would be the one, except when he talks about Philippine politics, which I try to avoid. So he is a man of faith. And then growing up also, since I had my undergraduate at the Ateneo de Manila with the Jesuits helped me a lot. At one point in my priesthood early on, I actually entertained the idea of becoming a Jesuit. But I told the later supervisor, I'm not that intellectual, so maybe it's not for me. So, but I do have, over a period of time, good spiritual directors who are Jesuits. And I'm kind of we go through stages. There's not really one person, but then grandma, my brother, my spiritual director, and yeah.
Thank you. I think that was a beautiful way of ending our Q&A tonight. And now I'm just going to ask Bishop Vincent to give his vote of thanks to Archbishop Jimenez.
As the evening is coming to an end, it pertains to me to say a few words of appreciation to Archbishop Jimenez for sharing with us his experience as a migrant worker, migrant priest, and finally a migrant bishop in a country that he has adopted as his own outside his native Philippines. But I'd like to say thank you to you for coming out this evening and for your interest in the kind of issues and voices that this forum has been, this series has been a forum. The exercise of this series is to advocate for the voices from elsewhere. And, I think it is characteristic of a church that goes out into the periphery to hear the voices from the margins, the voices from outside, and this evening we've heard that voice from outside, from the far-flung corners of the Pacific, even if the islands, the places that Archbishop Ryan is a pastor of, is also part of the Federation of the Catholic Bishops of Oceania. In some ways, Ryan and I both have similar life experiences. We both left our countries at birth and had to adjust to different environments and culture. Ryan went to the Northern Mariana Islands and taught in a Catholic school for several years. So he was well versed in the life of the ordinary people in this far-flung corner of the earth before he was called to the priesthood and then the episcopate, first in Saipan and more recently in Guam. We were both appointed to lead our respective dioceses 10 years ago by Pope Francis. God rest his soul, his first anniversary of death today. But Brian has had a more meteoric rise. He just a couple of years ago, besides being the president of his Bishops' Conference called the CPAC, and vice president of the Federation of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Oceania. Being a migrant, Ryan leverages his experience to advocate for a more inclusive church. This is truly a Catholic principle that is at the heart of the gospel. Yet, as he has pointed out, being inclusive is not just about accommodating different groups and cultures. It's not just about coexisting in a melting pot. He's spoken about interculturality, which is a shared life marked by encounter, dialogue, reciprocity, mutual transformation, and communion. So it's not just multiculturalism, but it's learning from one another. It's advocating for the rights of one another and promoting the agency of one another and being enriched in the process. Perhaps it is in this perspective that convinced Ryan to accompany not just migrants from diverse traditions, but also groups like LGBTIQ who feel unwelcome in church institutions. Another theme in Ryan's presentation this evening that resonates with me deeply is his advocacy for the indigenous people in the face of globalization, the legacy of Spanish colonization, and the predominance of the American culture and language or English. He says that honoring indigenous language is not optional. It is part of affirming the dignity and identity of the indigenous people. So much that to pray in Chamorro is not only to pray, but to reclaim a lost story, a lost culture, a culture that was once silenced. And I think we can all resonate with these sentiments as we seek to honor the heritage, tradition, and spirituality of our own indigenous peoples in this land. So thank you, Archbishop Jimenez, for your deep faith steeped in God's pathos and for your message for the church in Australia and globally. We in this diocese are honored to listen to your voice and to be inspired and to be challenged by that voice. So let's put our hands once more.